And you can imagine that in a really big region, this sprawl looks friggin' enormous. And I'll just give you like a, just like a short thing, for example, of what happened in Brazil. Because they descended on it like a pack of vultures. Now, these are all entities funded by the U.S. government. Now, red is funding, and the green refers to their direct intermediation work. So you have the U.S. State Department, which does our overt diplomacy. You have the CIA, which does our covert diplomacy. And you have USAID, which is sort of the entity that straddles the two of them, in the sense that it's formally overt, in the sense that it is a U.S. government agency, unlike the National Endowment for Democracy, which again was created by the CIA but it's not really the CIA. It's actually an independent thing that we came up with. But the world bought it, and so we live in the aftermath of their ignorance. But essentially, USAID and the National Endowment for Democracy created this program called CEPS, the Center for Excellence in Political Process Strengthening. They get $150 million a year from the State Department in order to get other countries to pass censorship laws. And they have 20 million of their 150 million budget went specifically to Brazil. Now, CEPS gets its money from the National Endowment for Democracy, from the NDI, which is the DNC branch of it, the IRI, which is the RNC branch of the CIA, and this thing called IFES, the International Foundation for Election Systems. And CEPS created this program in Brazil to get Brazil's TSE, to get their election court to pass these progressive layers of censorship laws. This started in 2018 when they descended on them. They capacity built the Atlantic Council, the Wilson Center, the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. By the way, the Atlantic Council has 7 CIA directors on its board. It gets annual funding from the Pentagon, the State Department, and the National Endowment for Democracy. The Wilson Center gets about 90%, or I think it gets a third of its budget from the U.S. government. The Wilson Center is where Nina Jankovic came from. The Wilson Center also hosts an amazing CIA archive that I actually pulled the inauguration of organized political warfare from later in the slide presentation. That actually comes from the Wilson Center CIA archive. The Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, which was run from 2014 to 2021 by a guy named Bill Burns. He left in 2021. If you're wondering what he's doing now, if that name sounds familiar, it's because he is the director of the Central Intelligence Agency. MEDAM, which is funded by the U.S. State Department and has also gotten DARPA grants. Pointer, which has about, 35 different, that's the International Fact-Checking, Independent Fact-Checking Network, which happens to have something like 35 State Department grants alone and is completely back-channeled by this whole network. Every single one of these worked in tandem with the TSE. They actually met with the officials. They flew them to the U.S. They went to Brazil to coordinate. They actually formally partnered with them. For example, the Atlantic Council is one of the 67 partnered institutions of the TSE. Even EIP was a part of this. Emerson Brookings and several others had direct meetings. Actually, did training workshops for how to get TSE to understand the disinformation challenge from 2018 onward. Meanwhile, it was actually the National Endowment for Democracy's union branch, which gave Lula, the AFL used to be called the AFL-CIA in the 1960s because it was so penetrated by the Central Intelligence Agency. Somehow that history has been forgotten to the populist right. But the NED has 4 branches. One of them is the NDI and the IRI. Another one is called CPAY. It's the Center for International Private Enterprise. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's the big business wing of the CIA. But the fourth of their core 4s is something called the Solidarity Center, which was named for the CIA's work essentially with the Solidarity movement. I think it was a good thing that Poland, became a free country. If they weren't doing this to us, I'm not sure I would have a problem with it, but they're friggin' doing it to us, so we need to understand all this. So their 4th entity is called the Solidarity Center. Now, the Solidarity Center played a major role in Lula's political emergence and his reemergence after his prison term. And the Solidarity Center gave Lula their Man of the Year award in 2021 when he was preparing his, while the National Endowment for Democracy is creating every single one of these are U.S. government funded or in U.S. government back channel. They're a part of the CEPS Disinformation Partner Network in Brazil. This is just, and by the way, I was having spacing trouble. There's about 3 dozen more. But they created a swarm army of soft power institutions in order to get Brazil to kneecap WhatsApp and Telegram and then finally X. And in fact, the National Endowment for Democracy, a guy named Dean Jackson there, even penned an op-ed a month and a half ago where he said that Elon Musk, and this again, the National Endowment for Democracy, this is the CIA, created by the CIA director. And he wrote this letter saying that Elon Musk is now a bigger threat than Putin or Xi because it's a more proximal threat and because of his ties to the U.S. national defense establishment through SpaceX and the role of Tesla in the green revolution, that he's a stickier target. So we need to really sort of elevate the threat that Elon poses, because we're not doing enough to stop him yet. Now, this is, again, the same organization that gets all of its budget from USAID by way of the U.S. State Department, which was created by the CIA. It actually is a license to back channel with the CIA under the, as long as it's approved by the Senate Intelligence Committee. So everything that happened in Brazil, they built, some of these look, now again, these, and there's about a dozen more just on the U.S. side. And again, I tried to put flags here. These look like they're Brazilian entities. In Australia, these will look like they are endogenous to Australia. It will look like an Australian university, an Australian newspaper. But they are getting their money from a U.S. government program. They are being back-channeled by U.S. diplomatic efforts to do the judicial reform in the country, to install a capacity to censor the rise of political movements. And I want to just, sorry, if I have time for just one last thing. So I have this